Everyone mocked the poor woman covering her house with crucifixes, until the miracle happened. Megan Harrison was alone again. The echo of the neighbors' cruel laughter still rang in her ears as she held the hammer firmly in her trembling hands. At 32 years old, she carried on her back the weight of being a single mother and the stigma of an abandoned woman in a small town where everyone knew each other. On that freezing January morning in Aspen, Colorado, she nailed another wooden crucifix to the fence separating her small lot from the neighbor's property. People passing by on the street would stop to whisper comments that reached her ears like stabs. "There she goes again with that obsession," murmured Mrs. Martha, the neighbor on the right, to her close friend. "Ever since Ethan left, she's not the same. Poor Lily, growing up with a mother like that." Megan pretended not to hear and kept working. Each crucifix she drove into the frozen ground or nailed to the backyard trees had a meaning that no one else understood. They were markers of resistance, symbols that she was still standing after the storm that had destroyed her life 2 years earlier. The cold wind cut across her face as she adjusted the red hood of the coat she had received from a charitable neighbor the previous winter. The snowflakes beginning to fall clung to her dark hair and to the small wooden crosses scattered across her entire property. "Mummy, why does Mrs. Martha keep looking at us like that?" asked Lily, her 7-year-old daughter, appearing at the front door wearing a worn but clean blue coat. Megan stopped what she was doing and crouched down to the girl's height. Lily had the same expressive brown eyes as her mother, but carried an innocence that Megan fought to preserve at all costs. "People sometimes don't understand the things we do, sweetheart," Megan replied, stroking the girl's hair. "But that doesn't mean we're wrong." "But why do you make these crucifixes, Mom?" Megan hesitated. How could she explain to a 7-year-old child that each cross represented a moment when she had thought about giving up on everything, but chose to keep going? How could she say it was her way of holding on to her sanity in a situation that seemed to have no way out? "Because they remind me that there's always hope," she finally said, kissing her daughter's forehead. "Now go back inside, it's too cold out here." Lily obeyed, but before leaving she turned and asked, "Mom, is Daddy ever coming back?" The question cut through Megan's chest like a blade. It had been 2 years since Ethan had left on an ordinary morning, leaving only a note on the kitchen table. "I can't take this life anymore. I wasn't meant to be a family man. Take care of yourselves." "I don't know, sweetheart. But the two of us are fine together, aren't we?" Lily smiled and nodded before running back inside. Megan returned to her work, but now her tears mixed with the snowflakes on her face. The house they lived in was simple: 2 bedrooms, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. The 500-square-meter lot had been an inheritance from her maternal grandmother, and it was all she had left in terms of stability. Ethan had taken the car, emptied the bank account, and left only debts behind. Megan worked as a cleaning lady in a few houses in town 3 times a week, earning enough to buy the basics. The extra money she managed to save by collecting aluminum cans was invested in the wood she used to make the crucifixes. It was an activity that had started almost by accident, but now consumed all her free moments. The first crucifix had been made the week after Ethan abandoned her. Megan found some old boards in the backyard and, without really knowing why, decided to turn them into a simple cross. The manual labor had calmed her turbulent mind in that moment of total despair. Now, 2 years later, her yard was filled with these creations. There were small crucifixes hanging from tree branches, medium ones stuck in the ground like markers, and some larger ones leaning against the fence. All of them were made from reclaimed wood she collected from construction sites around town or received from local shopkeepers. "That woman is crazy," commented Mr. Arthur, the neighbor on the left side, to his wife while watching Megan work in the morning frost. "She's dangerous. I'm going to talk to the head of the Homeowners Association." Mrs. Brenda, Mr. Arthur's wife, nodded in agreement. "Can you imagine if everyone started pulling stunts like that in the neighborhood? It devalues our property. And that little girl growing up in the middle of all this mess." The criticism was constant, but Megan had learned to filter out the meanest comments. What truly hurt her were the pitying looks she got on the street, at the bakery, at Lily's school. People saw her as a poor thing who had lost it after being abandoned. That afternoon, while Lily was at school, Megan received an unexpected visit. It was Mrs. Eleanor Miller, president of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association, a 65-year-old woman known for her strong personality and inflexible opinions. "Good afternoon, Megan," said Mrs. Eleanor, standing at the gate without coming in. "We need to talk." "Good afternoon, Mrs. Eleanor. Please come in," replied Megan, wiping her dirt-stained hands on her faded jeans. "I'd rather stay here. It's about this situation." Mrs. Eleanor gestured vaguely toward the crucifixes scattered across the yard. "The neighbors are upset." "Upset about what exactly?" "Megan, you're a smart young woman. You know very well that this isn't normal. It looks like a cemetery in the middle of the neighborhood. People are afraid you're having some kind of religious breakdown." "It's nothing religious, Mrs. Eleanor. It's just a hobby." "A hobby?" Mrs. Eleanor raised her graying eyebrows. "Megan, look around. There's a cross in every corner of your yard. That's not a hobby. That's an obsession." Megan felt the irritation rising in her chest. She had always been a peaceful person, but the constant pressure of the last few months was testing her limits. "With all due respect, Mrs. Eleanor, my property, my rules. I'm not bothering anyone." "Yes, you are. You're bothering us aesthetically. Imagine a family with young children wanting to buy Mr. Arthur's house and seeing that display next door. Who would want that? So it's about money. It's about living in a community, Megan. It's about respecting the shared space and thinking about others too." Mrs. Eleanor took a folded piece of paper from her purse and held it out to Megan. "What's this?" "A petition. There are already 15 signatures from neighbors asking you to remove those crosses and go back to having a normal yard." Megan opened the paper and recognized several signatures from people who lived on the street. Some surprised her, like Mrs. Dorothy's, who had always been kind to her. "And if I refuse?" "We'll take the matter to City Hall. There's a municipal ordinance about visual pollution in residential areas." "Visual pollution?" "Megan, be reasonable. You're an intelligent person, but you're going through a difficult time. We all understand that. But you can't ruin other people's lives because of your personal problems." The conversation ended without an agreement. Mrs. Eleanor left, leaving the petition on the kitchen table, and Megan stood staring at those signatures with a mix of anger and deep sadness. When Lily came home from school that afternoon, she found her mother sitting on the porch, looking at the crucifixes scattered around the yard, as if seeing them for the first time. "Mum, why are you sad?" "I'm not sad, sweetheart. Just thinking. Is it because of the crosses?" "The teacher asked about you today." Megan spun around, alarmed. "What did she ask?" "If you were doing okay. She said some mothers were worried about me." "And what did you say?" "That you're fine. That you make those crosses because you like to. Was that wrong?" Megan hugged her daughter tightly. "No, it wasn't wrong. You told the truth." But inside, Megan felt her world collapsing once again. Now it wasn't just the neighbors. The school was questioning her ability as a mother too. The fear of losing Lily, which had always been a shadow lurking in the back of her mind, began to take on a more concrete shape. That night, after Lily fell asleep, Megan went out to the backyard and walked among her crosses under the pale moonlight. Each one carried a memory, a tear, a moment of deciding between giving up or pushing forward. The cross near the rosebush had been made the night Lily first asked why her father never came home. The one by the mango tree marked the day she'd found work as a cleaning lady, after 2 weeks of searching for a job. The largest one, leaning against the back fence, had been made when she'd managed to pay her first electricity bill on her own. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, feel free to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing, they weren't symbols of madness or religious obsession. They were milestones of survival. Each cross represented a small victory against the despair that tried to consume her every day. But now, looking at the petition on the kitchen table, Megan wondered if the time had come to give in to the pressure. Maybe it really would be better for Lily if she tried to be more normal in the eyes of others. The next day, Megan woke up determined to have an honest conversation with her daughter about the situation. But before she could bring up the subject, Lily came home from school in tears. "What happened, sweetheart?" Mason said you're crazy, Lily sobbed. He said his mom told him you're sick and that I'm going to end up just like you. Megan felt the anger rise in her throat. Mason was the son of Mrs. Martha, the neighbor who talked the most trash about her behind her back. And what did you say to him? I said you're not crazy, but he laughed at me, and the teacher heard everything. Did the teacher say anything? She said they're going to schedule a meeting to talk to you. Megan closed her eyes and counted to 10. The situation was spiraling completely out of control. Lily, look at me, she said, kneeling down to the girl's level. Do you believe your mom is okay? Of course I do. Then it doesn't matter what other people say. We know the truth. But even as she said those words to calm her daughter, Megan felt her confidence slipping away. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she really had lost her way after Ethan abandoned her. The next morning it rained heavily. Megan took the opportunity to stay inside and organize a few things, trying to think of a solution to the pressure she was under. That's when she heard noise in the backyard. Looking through the window, she saw 2 teenagers kicking her smaller crosses and knocking down the ones that were just leaning against things. The rain made it hard to see, but she recognized one of them. It was Tyler, Mr. Arthur's grandson. Without thinking twice, Megan ran outside into the rain. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" she shouted. The boys got spooked and ran off, but Tyler tripped in the mud and fell. Megan reached him before he could get back up. "Tyler, your grandfather is going to hear about this," she said, grabbing the arm of the 15-year-old. "Let me go. You really are crazy. Why were you destroying my things? Because you're insane. Everyone knows. My grandmother said you're haunting the neighborhood with those crosses." Haunting. Tyler realized he had said too much and tried to pull away, but Megan wouldn't let him go. "Tyler, answer me one thing. Who told you guys to do this?" The boy hesitated and looked away. "Nobody told us. We came on our own." "That's a lie. Teenagers don't do anything on their own when it involves an adult's home. Who told you?" "I can't say." "Yes, you can. And you will. Or I'll talk to your parents about vandalism." Tyler looked around desperately and finally gave in. "Mrs. Eleanor, she gave us $20 to take down some of the crosses so you'd see that it's not a good idea to keep them here." Megan felt the world spin. Mrs. Eleanor had hired teenagers to vandalize her property and intimidate her. "Get out of here, Tyler, and tell your friends that if they come back here, I'm calling the police." She let go of the boy, who ran off in the rain. Megan stood still in the middle of the yard, looking at the damaged crosses scattered in the mud. Some were broken, others just dirty. But the symbol of the aggression was clear. She wasn't welcome in that community. That afternoon, after the rain stopped, Megan knocked on Mrs. Eleanor's door. The woman answered with a neutral expression, as if she didn't know what had happened. "Good afternoon, Megan. What do you want?" "You know very well what I want." "An explanation." "An explanation for what?" "For sending the boys to destroy my crosses." Mrs. Eleanor sighed and made an impatient gesture. "Megan, you're being dramatic. Some kids pulled a prank and you want to blame the adults." "Tyler told me everything, about the $20. Tyler is a troubled boy who's always making up stories." "Mrs. Eleanor, why are you doing this to me?" The question came out in a more vulnerable tone than Megan had intended. Mrs. Eleanor hesitated for a moment, and something in her expression softened slightly. "Megan, come sit here with me for a minute," she said, pointing to the plastic chairs on the porch. Megan hesitated, but eventually accepted. The two sat in silence for a few seconds before Mrs. Eleanor spoke. "Do you remember my husband, Howard?" "I do. Mr. Howard was very kind. He passed away 3 months ago." The news caught Megan by surprise. She didn't know he had died. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Eleanor. I didn't know. It was cancer. We found out too late. In his final months, he used to sit on the porch looking at your yard, watching you make those crosses." "Did it bother him?" "No, quite the opposite. He said you had the courage to express your pain in a way he couldn't." Megan was confused. The conversation wasn't going the way she expected. "I don't understand, Mrs. Eleanor. Howard died on a Monday morning. I was alone with him when it happened. In the days that followed, I would sit on the porch waiting, I don't know what, maybe waiting for him to come back. Mrs. Eleanor paused and wiped away a tear that insisted on falling. That's when I started paying closer attention to your work. All those crosses, and I got so angry. How dare you show your pain like that when I had to hide mine? Mrs. Eleanor, I know it's unfair. I know I'm projecting my situation onto yours, but when I see those crosses, they remind me that I lost everything and I don't even have the courage to cry in public. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of cars passing on the street. Megan didn't know what to say. All the anger she felt toward Mrs. Eleanor was turning into something close to compassion. Why didn't you tell me about Howard before? Because admitting that I'm jealous of an abandoned woman would seem too ridiculous. It's not ridiculous, it's human. Mrs. Eleanor looked at Megan in surprise. You're not mad at me. I am. But I also understand. The two sat side by side for a few more minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Megan, I'm going to talk to the neighbors about the petition, Mrs. Eleanor finally said. Don't bother. Maybe they're right after all. No, they're not. And neither was I. Everyone deals with pain the best way they can. When Megan got home that afternoon, Lily was waiting for her anxiously. Mom, why did you take so long? I went to talk to Mrs. Eleanor. Did she yell at you? No. Actually, we found out we have more in common than we thought. Lily didn't fully understand the answer, but she felt relieved to see her mother seemed calmer. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. The conversation with Mrs. Eleanor had affected her in an unexpected way. For the first time in 2 years, she realized that maybe other people around her were also suffering silently. The next morning, while fixing the crosses damaged by the rain and the teenagers, Megan heard footsteps in the backyard. It was Mrs. Eleanor carrying a wooden box. Good morning, Megan. Good morning, Mrs. Eleanor. What's that? Some leftover boards from when Howard renovated the shed last year. I thought maybe you could use them. Megan opened the box and saw several pieces of good quality wood, all cut to standard sizes. Mrs. Eleanor, I don't know what to say. Could you teach me how to make those crosses? The question caught Megan completely off guard. Are you sure? I am. I think I need to find a way to process everything I'm feeling. And that's how an unexpected partnership began between the two women. Mrs. Eleanor would show up in Megan's backyard every afternoon after Lily got home from school, and the three of them would spend a few hours working with wood. Mrs. Eleanor turned out to be surprisingly skilled with the tools. She said she had learned some basic woodworking techniques from her husband over their 42 years of marriage. Howard always wanted to teach me more, but I thought carpentry was a man's thing, she commented one afternoon while sanding a piece of wood. Silly, isn't it? We always think we'll have time to learn things later, Megan replied, until we find out that later sometimes never comes. Lily watched the two adults working and asked constant questions about the process. She showed genuine interest in the craft and quickly learned to help with simple tasks like sorting nails and applying varnish. Mum, can I make a cross of my own? She asked one day. Of course, sweetheart, but you'll need help with some of the tools. I'll help her, Mrs. Eleanor offered, if you don't mind. I don't mind, that would be great. Seeing Lily and Mrs. Eleanor working together filled Megan with a tenderness she hadn't felt in a long time. The girl was gaining a grandmother figure, and Mrs. Eleanor seemed to blossom in that role, but not everything was resolved. Other neighbors began to question Mrs. Eleanor's constant presence in Megan's backyard. Mr. Arthur and Mrs. Brenda, specifically, were bothered by what they called the betrayal of the association president. Eleanor, you're being manipulated by that woman, Mrs. Brenda said one afternoon when she ran into Mrs. Eleanor coming back from Megan's house. She's convinced you to take part in her madness. Brenda, it's not madness, it's therapy. Therapy? Eleanor, you're becoming just like her, obsessed with wood and nails. And what's the problem with that? I'm feeling better than I have in months. The problem is that you were our leader. You were the one who was going to solve this situation, and now you've become an accomplice. The pressure from the neighbors on Mrs. Eleanor increased over the following weeks. She started arriving at Megan's backyard, visibly tense, and on some days she didn't show up at all. "Is Mrs. Eleanor okay?" Megan asked one morning after a week had passed without a visit from her neighbor. "I don't know. I think they're pressuring her to stop coming here," Lily replied. "How do you know?" "Because yesterday, when I was coming back from school, I heard Mrs. Brenda talking loudly to her at the gate. Megan decided it was time to take the initiative. The following afternoon, she knocked on Mrs. Eleanor's door. "Megan, what a surprise," Mrs. Eleanor said, but her tone didn't sound entirely natural. "May I come in? I need to talk to you." "Actually, I was just heading out to—" "Mrs. Eleanor, please. 5 minutes." The woman hesitated but eventually let Megan inside. The house was impeccably organized, but there was an air of melancholy in the room that hadn't been there before. "Are the neighbors pressuring you to stop working with me?" "Megan, you're very direct. Is it true?" Mrs. Eleanor sighed and sat down in the armchair that had clearly belonged to her husband. "They think I'm fragile, that you're taking advantage of my situation. And do you believe that?" "No, but they've been my friends for decades. It's hard to completely ignore what they say." "Mrs. Eleanor, you taught me that each person deals with pain the best way they can. Remember?" "I remember." "Then why are you letting others decide how you should deal with yours?" Mrs. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "Because it's easier to do what they expect of me than to face their judgment." "And how's that working out for you?" "Terrible. For the past 5 days I haven't gotten out of bed before 10 in the morning. I don't feel like doing anything." "Come with me right now, then." "Now?" "Now. Let's finish that crucifix you started last week." Mrs. Eleanor looked out the window and saw 2 neighbors talking on the sidewalk. "What if they see? Let them see. Are you going to hide forever?" It was a difficult decision, but Mrs. Eleanor eventually followed Megan back to the backyard. The neighbors did see, and the next day the tension in the neighborhood grew even worse. Mr. Arthur knocked on Megan's door on a Saturday morning. "Young lady, we need to talk," and he said, without any courtesy. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur. Please come in. I'll say what I have to say right here. You're taking advantage of a woman who just lost her husband." "Taking advantage how?" "By convincing her to take part in your strange activities. Eleanor wasn't like this before she started coming to your house. Maybe she wasn't like this because she was suppressing what she felt." "Suppressing?" "Young lady, Eleanor is a respectable woman. She's always been level-headed and sensible. Now she spends her afternoons hammering away as if she were a common laborer." Mr. Arthur's disrespectful tone irritated Megan. "What's wrong with being a laborer, Mr. Arthur?" "That's not what I'm talking about. It's about decency. It's about a woman her age behaving according to her social standing." "Social standing? Eleanor is the widow of a respected businessman, president of the association. People look up to her as an example. And now she's out there doing those things with a woman who was abandoned by her husband." The connection between Ethan's abandonment and her inadequacy as a person was clear in Mr. Arthur's words. Megan realized this wasn't just about the crucifixes. It was about social class, about gender roles, about expectations for how an abandoned woman should behave. "Mr. Arthur, with all due respect, but Mrs. Eleanor is an adult. She can choose how she wants to spend her time." "Yes, she can, but when her choices affect life in the neighborhood, it becomes everyone's problem." "How does it affect it?" "Look at this, young lady." He gestured toward the backyard full of crucifixes. "It looks like a cemetery, and now there are 2 women doing this. What kind of example are you setting for the children? What kind of example? That when life gets hard, you just go around hammering on wood and that solves everything. And what would be the right example? Solving problems with dignity, seeking proper help, not going around making a spectacle." At that moment, Mrs. Eleanor appeared at the gate. "Arthur, what are you doing here?" "Eleanor, thank God you're here. I'm trying to talk to your friend about this whole situation." "What situation?" "Eleanor, you can't keep doing this. The neighbors are talking. They say you lost your way after Howard died. And what if I did?" Mrs. Eleanor's response surprised both Megan and Mr. Arthur. "Eleanor, Arthur, have you ever lost a husband?" No, but then you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it's like to wake up every morning in an empty house. You don't know what it's like to look for someone who isn't there anymore." You don't know what it's like to try to keep your composure when you're falling apart inside. Mr. Arthur was visibly uncomfortable with Mrs. Eleanor's bluntness. Eleanor, we all understand your pain, but no, you don't understand. You want me to pretend everything is fine, that I go back to chairing meetings and organizing parties as if nothing had happened. We want you to be strong like you've always been. Arthur, I'm not strong. I never was. It was Howard who gave me strength. Now that he's no longer here, I need to find my own strength. And working with my hands, creating something, makes me feel alive. Eleanor, you're lowering yourself. Lowering myself. Mrs. Eleanor looked at Megan and then back at Mr. Arthur. Arthur, do you think helping a neighbor who's fighting to rebuild her life is lowering myself? I think you're confusing charity with inappropriate friendship. Inappropriate friendship. Eleanor, Megan is a woman abandoned by her husband. No education, no prospects. You two have nothing in common. Megan felt her face burn with shame and anger, but Mrs. Eleanor answered before she could speak. Arthur, Megan and I have everything in common. We both lost our partners. We're both building a new life on our own. We're both learning to deal with the judgment of people who think they know what's best for us. Eleanor, are you comparing a separation to the death of your husband? I'm comparing two forms of loss and two forms of starting over. Mr. Arthur realized he had lost that battle and changed tactics. Fine, Eleanor, but think about your reputation, your position in the community. What position? President of a homeowners association that wants to control how neighbors deal with their own pain. Eleanor, Arthur, I resign. What? I'm resigning as president of the association. Pick someone else to judge the neighbors. Mr. Arthur left completely frustrated, and his departure was followed by a heavy silence between the two women. Mrs. Eleanor, you didn't have to do that for my sake, Megan said finally. I didn't do it for your sake. I did it for mine. Arthur is right about one thing. I shouldn't be chairing an association that wants to decide how people should live. That afternoon, the two of them worked in silence for a long time. It was as if the argument with Mr. Arthur had opened a wound in both of them, and they needed time to process what had happened. Megan, can I ask you something? Mrs. Eleanor said after an hour without speaking. Of course. Do you feel anger toward Ethan? The question caught Megan off guard. Sometimes more at the beginning. And now? Now I feel more pity. Pity? Pity for someone who had a family and thought he'd be happier alone. Pity for someone who couldn't fight when life got hard. Do you think he regrets it? I don't know, I hope so. Not for us, but for himself. Mrs. Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. That's generous of you. It's not generosity, it's self-preservation. Carrying anger eats away at you from the inside. So, what did you do with the anger? Megan gestured to the crosses scattered around the backyard. I turned it into wood and nails. It was at that moment that Lily came running in from school, out of breath. Mom! Mom! There's a woman in the principal's office who wants to talk to you. What woman? A woman from the government. She said she's a social worker. Megan felt her blood run cold. A social worker only showed up when there was a report of neglect or child abuse. Did she say what she wanted? No. She just said she needs to visit our house and talk to you. Mrs. Eleanor noticed the panic on Megan's face. Calm down. Let's think about what to do. Mrs. Eleanor, if they take Lily away from me, they won't take her. You're a good mother, anyone can see that. But the crosses, all this mess with the neighbors. Megan, take a deep breath. We'll sort this out together. The two of them walked to the school, where they found a woman of about 40 waiting in the front office. She introduced herself as Valerie Sullivan, a social worker from City Hall. Mrs. Megan Harrison? That's me. We need to talk. We received some calls about your family situation. What kind of calls? Anonymous reports of possible child neglect and inappropriate behavior. Megan felt her legs go weak. Can I ask what the specific accusations are? I'd prefer to discuss that at your home. May I accompany you now? The walk back home was tense. Lily walked between the two adults without fully understanding what was happening, but sensing the tension in the air. When they reached the yard, Valerie spent a few seconds observing the crosses scattered all around. Her expression was neutral, but Megan tried to figure out what she was thinking. "May I ask how many pieces there are?" asked Valerie. "I haven't counted exactly, maybe 80 or 90. "And how long have you been doing this?" 2 years. Since your husband left home?" "Yes." Valerie made some notes in a small notebook. "Mrs. Megan, may I go inside your house?" "Of course." The inside of the house was clean and organized. Lily had her own room with a maid bed, a study desk, and clean clothes in the closet. The kitchen had proper food, and everything indicated that a child was being well cared for. "Lily, can you show me your homework desk?" asked Valerie. The girl led the social worker to her room and showed her notebooks and school supplies, all organized and up to date. "Do you like studying, Lily?" "Yes, I do, especially math." "And what do you think about the work your mother does in the yard?" "I think it's beautiful. She teaches me some things too." "Does she make you help?" "No. I help because I want to." "Are you afraid of your mother?" "Afraid? Why?" "I don't know." "That's why I'm asking. My mom is the best person in the world. She takes care of me, helps me with my homework, makes delicious food." After talking with Lily for a few more minutes, Valerie went back to the living room where Megan and Mrs. Eleanor were waiting anxiously. "Mrs. Megan, I need to ask you some questions about your emotional stability." "Go ahead." "Have you ever thought about hurting yourself or hurting your daughter?" "Never." "Do you have a history of alcohol or drug use?" "No." "Are you receiving medical or psychological care?" "No. I can't afford it." "And what about the reports of obsessive behavior?" Megan looked at the crosses visible through the window. "Are you referring to the crosses?" "Yes. Some people have reported that you have an unhealthy fixation on making these pieces." "Can I explain about that?" "Please do." Megan took a deep breath and decided to tell the whole truth. "When my husband left, I fell into a deep depression. I would go days without being able to get out of bed. Lily was 5 years old and was being neglected because I couldn't function normally." Valerie made a note. "One day, I found some old boards in the backyard and decided to make something with them to try to occupy my mind. I made a simple cross, kind of crooked, kind of ugly, but the process of using my hands, of building something, calmed me down in a way I hadn't felt in months." "And then you decided to make more?" "Every time I felt like giving up on everything, I made a cross. Each one marks a moment when I chose to keep living and taking care of my daughter instead of giving in to despair." Valerie looked out the window again, as if she saw the crucifixes with different eyes. "And the neighbors?" "Some neighbors think it's strange, others understand. Mrs. Eleanor here started working with me and has helped a lot." "Mrs. Eleanor, can you confirm that?" "I can. And I can say that Megan is one of the most dedicated and caring people with children that I know. Lily is a happy, intelligent, and well-cared-for girl." Valerie asked a few more questions and took more notes. Then she asked to speak with Lily again, alone. The conversation lasted about 20 minutes. When they came back to the living room, Valerie had a more relaxed expression. "Mrs. Megan, your reports were made by people who clearly don't know your family situation well." "What do you mean?" "The accusations included neglect of the child's nutrition, hygiene, and education. They also included suspicions of dangerous religious fanaticism." "And?" "Your daughter is clearly well-fed, clean, educated, and emotionally healthy, and your woodwork, though unusual, doesn't have any fanatical religious connotation. It's clearly a therapeutic activity." Megan felt an enormous relief. "So there's no problem?" "There's no legal problem, but I have a suggestion." "What?" "City Hall has an occupational therapy program for families in vulnerable situations. It includes free psychological support and craft workshops. I think you would benefit greatly from it." "Would it be mandatory?" "No. It would be support. A way for you to have official backing for your activities and maybe help to expand the project." Mrs. Eleanor became immediately interested. "What kind of expansion?" "Well, you could teach other people. There are many women in the city going through similar situations who could benefit from an activity like this. The idea caught Megan by surprise. Teach other people? Why not? You're already doing it informally. With support from City Hall, you could make it official and maybe even generate a small income. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The conversation with Valerie planted a seed that Megan didn't expect. Over the following weeks, she kept thinking about the possibility of turning her personal activity into something bigger. "What do you think, Mrs. Eleanor?" she asked one afternoon while they were sanding some pieces. "I think it's interesting, but are you sure you want other people in your sacred space?" Sacred space? Megan, this backyard is where you healed, where you found your strength. Sharing it might change the energy of the place, or it might multiply the energy. Mrs. Eleanor smiled. "You've always been more optimistic than me." "It's not optimism, it's just, I don't know. Ever since you started working with me, things have felt lighter. Maybe more people could bring even more lightness. And what if it brings more complications? Then we deal with the complications." 2 weeks later, Valerie returned with information about the City Hall program. "I secured initial funding of $600 for equipment and materials," she announced, "and we have approval for a 3-month pilot project." "How would it work?" "Workshops once a week, with a maximum of 8 participants. You two would be the volunteer instructors, and I'd come along as the technical supervisor. And after the 3 months, if the project works out, we can seek bigger funding and make it official as a permanent municipal program." Megan looked at Mrs. Eleanor, who gave an encouraging gesture. "And who would the participants be?" "Women in emotionally or socially vulnerable situations. Divorced women, widows, unemployed women, single mothers. People who could benefit from a therapeutic activity and from building a support network." The first workshop was scheduled for a Saturday morning. Valerie had selected 6 women: Mary Catherine Gardner, 58 years old, recently widowed; Susan, 45, divorced for 6 months; Ashley, 28, single mother of young twins; June, 63, whose only daughter had moved to another state; Nancy, 52, unemployed for a year; and Monica, 35, who had lost her home in a messy separation. Megan woke up that Saturday with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Mrs. Eleanor arrived early to help organize the backyard and prepare the materials. "What if they think all of this is really strange?" Megan asked for the 10th time. "Megan, stop worrying. The women who are here today are here because they need exactly what you two have to offer." At 9 in the morning, the participants began to arrive. The first reaction was surprise at seeing so many crucifixes scattered around the backyard, but Valerie had prepared the group well for what to expect. "Good morning, everyone," said Megan, more nervous than she'd imagined. "Welcome. I'm Megan, and this is Mrs. Eleanor." "Good morning," the women replied, some shyer than others. "Before we begin, I wanted to explain a little about what we do here," Megan continued. "This isn't a professional woodworking course, it's more of a way to... How can I explain it? It's a way of turning feelings into something concrete," Mrs. Eleanor finished. "Exactly. Each piece you see here represents a moment when I chose to keep fighting instead of giving up." Mary Catherine, the recent widow, stepped forward. "Can I ask, why crosses specifically?" "Good question. At first I didn't really know why. I think subconsciously I knew that the cross is a symbol of suffering, but also of resurrection, of death and of new life." "And do you only make crosses or other things too?" asked Susan. "Mostly crosses," Mrs. Eleanor replied. "But we're open to trying other shapes." Valerie organized the group into pairs so that each pair would work on one piece. The initial dynamic was shy, with the women getting to know each other while learning to handle the basic tools. "I've never held a hammer in my life," confessed Ashley, the mother of the twins. "Me neither," said Monica. "My ex-husband did everything that involved tools. He used to say women had no knack for that sort of thing." "That's nonsense," countered June, the oldest woman in the group. "My mother built half of our house by herself when my father died." As the morning went on, the conversations became more natural. The women began sharing their stories while they worked. My husband died of a heart attack 4 months ago, Mary Catherine recounted. We'd been together for 36 years. I don't know who I am anymore without him. Mine left me for a 22-year-old, said Susan without bitterness. After 20 years of marriage, he decided he wanted to live the youth he never had. At least you two were married, commented Ashley. The father of my kids disappeared when he found out they were twins. He said he could handle 1 child, but 2 was too much. The stories were different, but the common denominator was clear. All of them were women who had lost something fundamental in their lives and were trying to rebuild a new identity. And you two? Nancy asked Megan and Mrs. Eleanor Miller. How did you get started with this? Megan told her story briefly, and Mrs. Eleanor Miller did the same. The participants listened attentively, and many identified with specific aspects of the 2 women's experiences. What impresses me the most, Monica said, is how you turned something that seemed like a weakness into a strength. What do you mean? Mrs. Eleanor Miller asked. Well, the neighbors criticized you for making those crosses. They said it was an obsession, that it was strange. But you kept going and now you're here teaching other people. That's true, June agreed. You took something others saw as a flaw and turned it into a quality. The first workshop ended with the participants having made 1 small simple cross each, but the most important part had been the exchange of experiences and the beginning of connections between women who recognized themselves in one another. How do you feel? Valerie asked before the participants left. Better than I have in months, Mary Catherine Gardner replied. It's been a long time since I talked about Thomas with people who understand. I enjoyed it too, Ashley said. It's hard to find time for myself with the twins, but this did me good. Is the next one next week, same time? Susan asked. If you want, Megan replied. We do, several of them said at once. After everyone had left, Megan, Mrs. Eleanor Miller, and Valerie stayed behind talking about the experience. What did you think? Valerie asked. Better than I expected, Megan admitted. I thought it would be harder to share this. It felt natural, Mrs. Eleanor Miller said. I think when you've had a true healing experience, it's natural to want to share it with someone who needs it. And would you be willing to keep going? Maybe even expand? Expand how? Megan asked. Increase the number of participants. Include teenagers. Maybe even men who are going through difficult situations. The idea of including men had never crossed Megan's mind. Do men do hands-on therapy too? Why not? Pain doesn't have a gender. The following week, the second workshop took place with the same participants, but now they arrived more relaxed and talkative. The work flowed better, and the conversations went deeper. Can I tell you all something? Ashley said as she sanded her second cross. This is the first time in 2 years I've spent 3 hours without thinking about my kids' problems. It's liberating, isn't it? Susan said. It feels like the mind rests when the hands are busy. That's true, Nancy agreed. At home, I spend all my time thinking that I don't have a job, that I don't have money, that I'm depending on my sister. Here, for a few hours, none of that matters. Mary Catherine Gardner had brought a photo of her late husband and showed it to the group. This was Thomas. It's been 5 months since he passed. He was handsome, Monica commented. You two looked happy. We were. That's why it's been so hard. It's not like a marriage that ends because it went wrong. It's a marriage that was working and got interrupted. Each type of loss has its own pain, Mrs. Eleanor Miller said. You can't compare them. That's true, June agreed. When my daughter moved to New York City, people would say, but at least she's alive, at least she's doing well, as if that erased the longing. The conversation about different types of loss took up a good portion of the morning. The women discovered that despite their different circumstances, the process of grief and rebuilding had universal aspects. Have you noticed how we're talking about difficult things without getting depressed? Ashley observed. It's because we're doing something together, replied Megan. Keeping our hands busy helps the mind process things better. And because we're not alone, added Susan, it's different to grieve alongside someone who understands. At the end of the second workshop, Mary Catherine Gardner made a request. Megan, could you teach my sister too? She lost her husband last year, and she's in a really bad place. Of course, If she wants to join, she'll be welcome. And I have a sister-in-law who's going through a divorce, said Monica. I think it would do her good. Valerie watched these interactions with growing interest. It was clear the project was working beyond initial expectations. By the third week, the group had grown to 9 participants through the women's own referrals. Megan had to rearrange the space in the backyard to accommodate more people. At that workshop, June brought some news. Ladies, I talked to the priest at my parish about what we're doing here. He was interested and asked if we could offer a workshop for the women in the senior group. Really? Asked Megan. Really. He said there are many older women at the church who are going through difficult times and could benefit from an activity like this. But would it be at a church? Asked Mrs. Eleanor. Because our work isn't religious. He understood that. He said it would be a therapeutic activity that would just happen in the parish hall. Nothing religious would be mandatory. Valerie was enthusiastic about the possibility. That would be great. We can use the pilot project to show that the model works and get support to expand. But I don't know if I have the capacity to coordinate workshops in multiple places, Megan said honestly. You don't need to be everywhere, Valerie replied. You can train other people to replicate the method. The idea of training facilitators was ambitious, but it made sense. Mrs. Eleanor immediately offered, I could coordinate the senior workshops. I'm already closer to that age group. Would you feel ready? Asked Megan. With your guidance, yes. And besides, it would be a way to honor Howard's memory. He always wanted me to use more of my potential. The 4th workshop was dedicated to preparing Mrs. Eleanor to coordinate her own group. The participants helped think through the methodology, suggested adaptations for older people, and offered support for the new endeavor. Could we do a demonstration? Suggested Susan. Let's all go together to the first senior workshop to support Mrs. Eleanor. That would be great, agreed Mary Catherine Gardner, and it would be a chance for the older ladies to see that this really works. The first workshop at the parish hall was scheduled for the following Tuesday afternoon. Mrs. Eleanor was nervous but confident. What if they think I'm crazy? She asked the night before. They'll think you're brave, Megan replied, and that you're offering something they need. Tuesday arrived and Megan accompanied Mrs. Eleanor to the church carrying materials and tools. The parish hall was spacious and well lit, perfect for the activity. The participants were 12 women between 60 and 75 years old, most of them widows or with sick husbands. Mrs. Eleanor began by introducing herself and telling her own story. My name is Eleanor Miller. I lost my husband Howard 6 months ago, and since then I've been learning to live a life I hadn't planned. The group listened with attention and a sense of recognition. I started working with woodcrafts as a way to cope with grief. It's not professional therapy, it's not religion, it's just a way to keep your hands busy while your heart heals. One of the participants, Mrs. Margaret, raised her hand. Don't you think working with the cross could be dangerous? My daughter said it can attract bad things. Mrs. Margaret, the cross we make here is a symbol of overcoming, not of religion. It's like making a vase or a chair. What matters is the process of creating, not the specific object. But why not make vases then? You can make vases too, replied Mrs. Eleanor with a smile. What matters is making something that has meaning for the person making it. The explanation seemed to satisfy the group, and the workshop continued with the ladies learning to handle basic tools. I haven't touched a hammer since my husband died, said Mrs. Gladys, 72 years old. He was the one who did everything that required strength. You'll see that you don't need much strength, encouraged Mrs. Eleanor. It's more a matter of technique. As the afternoon went on, the conversations deepened. The ladies began sharing their experiences of grief, loneliness, and fear of the future. My biggest fear is getting sick and having no one to take care of me, confessed Mrs. Phyllis. My children live far away and have their own lives. Mine is dying alone at home and only being found days later, said Mrs. Margaret. That's why it's important for us to get closer to one another, suggested Mrs. Eleanor, to create a support network. A support network? What do you mean? Well, if we meet every week, we'll notice when someone is missing. We can call to see how they're doing, we can visit. The idea of turning the workshops into a mutual support group excited the participants. We could exchange phone numbers, suggested Mrs. Gladys. And maybe do other activities together, added Mrs. Phyllis. "Go to the market as a group, take walks." When the workshop ended, Mrs. Eleanor was radiant. She had found her own purpose and identity outside the role of wife she had played for so long. "How was it?" asked Megan on the way back. "Better than I imagined. I think I found my calling." "Your calling?" "Taking care of women who are in the same situation as me. It's a way of taking care of myself too." In the following weeks, both groups thrived. Megan's original group reached 12 participants, and Mrs. Eleanor's senior group became established with 10 loyal ladies. But success also brought new challenges. Some neighbors who previously only complained quietly now began to protest more actively against the movement of people in the neighborhood. "This has turned into a mess," complained Mrs. Brenda to other neighbors. "Every Saturday morning there are strange people coming and going, and Tuesday afternoons too. And the noise of the hammering," added another neighbor. "It looks like a carpentry shop in the middle of a residential neighborhood." The pressure reached Megan through a new visit from City Hall enforcement. "Mrs. Megan Harrison," said the inspector, a serious, middle-aged man. "I'm Anthony Brooks, Municipal Code Enforcement Officer. We received complaints about unlicensed commercial activity in a residential zone." "Commercial activity? According to the complaints, you're operating a carpentry workshop without a business permit." "It's not a commercial activity. They're voluntary therapeutic workshops in partnership with the city's social services." "Do you have any documents proving that?" Megan went to get the papers Valerie had given her about the pilot project. The inspector examined the documents for a few minutes. "Everything is correct from the social services standpoint," he finally said. "But that doesn't resolve the issue of noise pollution and crowding in a residential area." "What kind of noise pollution?" "Noise from tools, group conversations, movement of people at times that bother the neighbors." "But it's only 3 hours a week and during business hours." "Mrs. Megan, I'll be honest with you. Technically, what you're doing doesn't violate any specific law, but it is causing a disturbance in the neighborhood." "And what do you suggest?" "Consider moving to a more suitable location. City Hall has community spaces they could make available to you." The suggestion caught Megan by surprise. From the start, the workshops were intrinsically linked to the backyard where it all began. It was there that the Crucifixes had been born, there that she had found her healing. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But know that if the complaints continue, I'll have to take more severe measures." After the inspector left, Megan sat in the backyard, looking at her crucifixes and thinking about the possibility of having to abandon that space. When Mrs. Eleanor arrived for that afternoon's workshop, she found Megan disheartened. "What happened?" Megan told her about the inspector's visit and the suggestion to move locations. "And are you thinking about accepting?" "I don't know. Maybe it's better for everyone." "Megan, are you thinking about giving up your home because of pressure from the neighbors?" "It's not giving up my home. It's just moving the workshop somewhere else." "And your crucifixes? What are you going to do with them?" "I don't know. Maybe take some down, keep only the most important ones." Mrs. Eleanor was silent for a few minutes. "Megan, can I tell you something you might not want to hear?" "Go ahead." "You're doing exactly what you did when Ethan abandoned you." "What do you mean?" "You're assuming the problem is you, that you need to change to fit what others expect." "But if I'm bothering the neighbors—" "Megan, you're offering help to women who need it. You're creating a space for healing and support. If that bothers some people, the problem isn't you." "But what about peace in the neighborhood?" "What peace?" "The peace of silence and conformity. The peace of everyone suffering alone so as not to bother anyone." The conversation with Mrs. Eleanor made Megan reflect deeply on what was really at stake. It wasn't just about workshops or crucifixes. It was about the right to exist authentically, to seek healing in the way that worked for her. That night, Megan couldn't sleep. She stood at the window looking at the moonlit backyard, thinking about everything she had built there. Each cross held a memory, a triumph, a moment of choosing between giving up and going on. The next morning, she made a decision. She wouldn't move the workshops, but she would talk to the neighbors once more, trying a different approach. First, she went to Mrs. Brenda's house. "Mrs. Brenda, can I talk to you for a few minutes?" "Of course, Megan. Come in." "Actually, I'd rather stay out here. I want to extend an invitation to you." "What kind of invitation?" "I want to invite you to take part in one of our workshops, to see with your own eyes what we do." Mrs. Brenda was surprised. "Megan, I'm not going through any problem that would justify—" "Mrs. Brenda, you lost your mother last year, didn't you?" "I did, but—" "And how was it for you to deal with that?" "It was hard, of course. But I got through it." "Are you sure you got through it?" Mrs. Brenda hesitated. "What do you mean?" "I mean that maybe you could benefit from talking to other women who have also lost important people, and maybe you could understand better why this matters to us." "Megan, I'm not going to be hammering nails like a factory worker. You don't have to hammer anything, you can just talk, you can just observe. And why would I do that? Because maybe it's a chance for us to understand each other better as neighbors, and maybe you'll find out we're not the troublesome people you imagine." Mrs. Brenda looked thoughtful. "If I go, it's only to observe, and if I don't like it, I'll leave." "Perfect." The same invitation was extended to other critical neighbors, including Mrs. Martha. Some flatly refused, but 3 ended up agreeing to take part, just to see what you folks do over there. The Saturday workshop with the neighbors was tense at first. The 3 women arrived looking wary and sat slightly apart from the main group. "Welcome," said Megan, trying to sound natural. "Today we have special guests. Mrs. Brenda, Mrs. Martha, and Mrs. Rosangela are our neighbors and came to see our work." "Good morning," the visitors replied without much enthusiasm. The workshop began as usual, with the regular participants sharing their week's news and working on their pieces. The neighbors watched in silence. It was Mary Catherine Gardner who broke the ice. "Mrs. Brenda, you live nearby. Have you noticed how these workshops have changed, Megan?" "Changed how?" "When I first started coming here, she was a very sad person. She spoke softly, walked hunched over, and seemed like she was always afraid. Now look at her. She's confident, self-assured, helping other people." "That's true," Susan agreed. "And it's not just her. All of us have changed since we started coming here." "Changed how?" asked Mrs. Martha, genuinely curious. "I had been on depression medication for 2 years," Ashley shared. "Since I started the workshops, I've managed to cut my dose in half. And I'd had chronic insomnia since my husband died," added Mary Catherine Gardner. "Now I sleep better because I'm not stewing over my problems alone all the time." Mrs. Rosangela, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "And you think that has to do with hammering nails?" "It has to do with not being alone," answered Monica. "It has to do with doing something concrete, something you can see and touch. It has to do with turning pain into something useful." "Useful how?" "Look at this cross I'm making," Monica showed her piece. "When it's finished, I'm going to put it in my daughter's room. Every time they look at it, they'll remember that their mother got through a hard time and managed to rebuild her life." "It's a symbol of resilience," explained Megan. "It's not religion. It's resilience." During the snack break, the 3 neighbors talked quietly among themselves. After the break, Mrs. Brenda asked a question that surprised everyone. "Can I try making a small piece?" "Of course," Megan answered, unable to hide her excitement. "I'll help you." Mrs. Brenda worked for nearly an hour on a small, simple cross. At first, she was visibly uncomfortable, but gradually she focused on the work and relaxed. "It's interesting," she commented while sanding the wood. "It really calms the mind." "Right," said Nancy. "We don't understand how it works, but it works." "And it's different from watching TV or reading a magazine," added June. "It's more active." "Active how?" "I don't know, like you're doing something for yourself, not just consuming something." When the workshop ended, the 3 neighbors seemed slightly different from how they'd arrived. "How was it for you?" asked Megan. "I confess it was quite different from what I expected," said Mrs. Brenda. "I thought it would be something more fanatical." "And what did you think of our mess, Mrs.?" Martha laughed for the first time. "The mess is much smaller than it looks from a distance, and at least it's a constructive mess." "Constructive? Well, you're building something. You're not just gossiping or watching television." Mrs. Rosangela, who had remained more reserved, made an unexpected confession. "Can I tell you something? My youngest son moved out last month. He's the last of the three. I'm feeling really empty." "Empty nest syndrome," said Monica, who had gone through the same thing. "It's awful. How do you all deal with it?" "Come next Saturday," invited Mary Catherine Gardner. "Talk to us about it." Mrs. Rosangela hesitated. "I don't know if—" "It's just talking," Megan encouraged. "You don't even have to work with wood if you don't want to." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to leave a like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out since we're just getting started. Now continuing on. The following week, Mrs. Rosangela came back and she brought a friend who was also going through problems with her adult children. The group was growing organically and the neighborhood's hostility was subsiding. But new challenges arose when Valerie arrived with unexpected news. "I have a proposal that could completely change the scope of the project." "What kind of proposal?" Megan asked. The Director of Social Services was impressed with the results of the pilot project. "He wants you to present the work at a state conference on community mental health." "Present it how?" "A talk on non-professional occupational therapy. You would be representing an innovative model of mutual support." The idea of speaking in public to an audience of professionals left Megan completely terrified. "Valerie, I can't do this. I don't have formal training. I don't know how to speak in public." "Megan, you don't need a degree to talk about your own experience. And Mrs. Eleanor can go with you." "I'd be in," said Mrs. Eleanor. "I think our story can help other communities. But what if they ask technical questions we don't know how to answer?" "The talk wouldn't be about technique," Valerie explained. "It would be about human results, about what works in practice." "When would it be?" 2 months from now, in Denver." The prospect of traveling to the capital and speaking to mental health specialists was at once terrifying and exciting for Megan. "Can I think it over?" "Of course. But it would be a unique opportunity to show that there are effective alternatives for emotional support that don't depend only on specialized professionals." "Alternatives?" "Megan, you created a self-help model that's working better than many conventional therapies. That's important. Other communities could benefit from it." That night, Megan talked to Lily about the possibility of the trip. "Mum, are you going to become famous?" the girl asked, excited. "Hey, it's not about becoming famous, sweetheart. It's about helping other people. And am I coming along?" "The trip is only 1 day. You'd stay with Mrs. Eleanor." "Mum, you have to go. You always teach me that when we have something good, we should share it." Her daughter's simple wisdom convinced Megan more than all of Valerie's arguments. "Then I'll accept." "Really? Really? But you're going to have to help me prepare what I'm going to say." "I can help. I can tell how it was before and how it is now." The idea of including Lily's perspective in the presentation seemed perfect to Megan. Over the following weeks, Megan and Mrs. Eleanor devoted themselves to preparing the talk. They wrote the project's story from the beginning, gathered testimonials from the participants, and organized photos that documented the work's evolution. "What do you think about bringing a few pieces to show?" Valerie suggested. "Bringing crosses to a mental health conference?" Megan doubted. "Why not? It's part of the story. It's important for them to understand that it's not about religion but about personal symbolism. And if they think it's strange?" "Megan, if they think it's strange, at least they'll remember you," said Mrs. Eleanor, laughing. A week before the trip, something happened that no one expected. Ethan showed up. Megan was in the backyard, working on a new cross, when she heard a familiar voice. "Hi, Megan." She turned and saw her ex-husband standing at the gate. 2.5 years later, he looked thinner, with grayer hair and a tired expression. "Ethan, what are you doing here?" "I came to talk to you, and to see Lily. Lily is at school. Can I wait?" "Yes, but let's talk first. Come in." Ethan walked into the backyard and stopped, clearly impressed by the number of crucifixes scattered all over the place. "Wow, Megan, what's all this? It's a long story. Can I hear it?" The two sat down at a wooden table that the workshop participants had built together. Megan briefly told him about the crucifixes, the workshops, and the project with City Hall. "You became a carpenter?" asked Ethan, confused. "Not exactly. I found a way to deal with my problems instead of running from them." The hint did not go unnoticed. "Megan, I know I made a lot of mistakes. I came here to... To what, Ethan?" "To apologize. And to see if we can try again." The words Megan had dreamed of hearing for so long now sounded strange to her ears. Try again. "I realized I made a huge mistake. I left here thinking I'd be happier on my own, but I wasn't. Quite the opposite." "And what changed?" "Everything. Being alone made me value what I had here. Family, stability, someone who truly cared about me." Megan stayed silent, processing Ethan's words. "And you think you can just come back and everything goes back to the way it was?" "No. I know I'm going to have to earn your trust back. Earn Lily's love back." "Ethan, a lot has changed in 2.5 years. I know, and I've changed too. I'm willing to really commit this time." "Where were you all this time?" "I lived in Seattle for a year. Then I went to New York City. I worked at a bunch of things, could never get stable." "And why did you come back now?" "Because I finally understood that I was running from my problems instead of solving them." At that moment, Lily arrived from school and saw her father in the backyard. Her reaction was one of surprise, but not joy, as Megan had expected. "Dad? What are you doing here?" "Hey, Princess. I came to see you two. Are you going to live here again?" "I don't know yet. That depends on you two." Lily looked at her mother, then at her father. "Mom, can I talk to you in private?" Megan and Lily went inside the house, leaving Ethan in the backyard. "Mom, do you want Dad to come back?" the girl asked directly. "I don't know, sweetie. It's complicated. What do you think?" "I was angry at him for a long time, but now I'm not angry anymore." "And do you miss him?" "A little, but not as much as before." "Why?" "Because we got used to it being just the two of us. And now we have Mrs. Eleanor and the women from the workshops and everyone who cares about us." Lily's maturity at 7 years old impressed Megan. "So, what do you think we should do?" "I think Dad can be part of our lives, but he doesn't need to move back in." "What do you mean?" "He can come visit. He can help out with some things, but our home doesn't need to go back to the way it was." Megan hugged her daughter, amazed by her early wisdom. "Are you sure about that?" "I am. Our life is good now. If Dad wants to be part of it, he has to fit into our new life, not us going back to the old one." When they returned to the backyard, Ethan was waiting anxiously. "So, did you talk?" "Ethan, you can be part of our lives, but things aren't going to go back to the way they were," said Megan. "What do you mean?" "You abandoned us when we needed you. Now we've rebuilt ourselves. If you want to be part of it, you're going to have to fit into the life we've built, not the other way around." "And what life is that?" Megan gestured to the crucifixes, to the workbench, to the workshop materials. "This life. A life where I help other women, where I have a purpose, where I don't depend on anyone to be happy. And where do I fit into that? I don't know. Maybe you can help in some way. Maybe you can learn something too. But it won't be like before, with you deciding everything and me just going along." Ethan looked around once more, as if trying to fully understand what had happened there. "Megan, you've become very strong." "I haven't become strong. I learned not to depend on other people's strength. It's the same thing." "No, it isn't. Borrowed strength can leave at any moment. Your own strength no one can take away." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Mrs. Eleanor, who had come to prepare for the talk. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know you had a visitor," she said upon seeing Ethan. "Mrs. Eleanor, this is Ethan, Lily's father," Megan introduced him. "Ah, the famous Ethan," said Mrs. Eleanor, not hiding a certain irony. "Famous?" he asked, uncomfortable. "Well, your leaving was what started all of this here," she gestured to the crucifixes. "In a way, it was thanks to you that Megan discovered her strength." "Mrs. Eleanor," Megan tried to interject. "It's true, Megan. If he hadn't left, You never would have discovered that you could be happy on your own. You never would have created all of this. Ethan was visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Well, I think I'll get going. Megan, can I come back tomorrow so we can talk more? You can, but tomorrow is Saturday, the day of the workshop. If you come, you'll have to spend time with the women here. That's fine. Maybe it would be good for me to better understand what you all do. After Ethan left, Mrs. Eleanor and Megan talked about the situation. What did you think of him? Megan asked. He seems truly remorseful, but remorse doesn't erase 2.5 years of abandonment. That's true, and I'm no longer the same person he abandoned. Exactly. If he wants to be part of your life now, he'll have to get to know the new Megan first. The following Saturday, Ethan showed up during the workshop. The participants were curious to see a man in the group, and Megan had to explain who he was. This is Ethan, Lily's father. He's trying to understand what we do here. Ah, the ex-husband, said Ashley, without beating around the bush, the one who abandoned you all. Ashley, Megan tried to soften things. No, let her speak, said Ethan. She's right. I abandoned them. And now you want to come back? Asked Mary Catherine Gardner. I want to try to fix the mistakes I've made. How? Asked Susan, as direct as always. Honestly, I don't know yet. I'm trying to first understand what happened here in my absence. What happened is that your ex-wife became an incredible person, said Monica. She helped a lot of people overcome problems similar to hers. Monica is right, added Nancy. Megan is an example for all of us. An example of what? That we can rebuild ourselves without depending on anyone, answered June. That pain can become purpose. Ethan spent the morning watching the women work and talk. Megan noticed that he was genuinely trying to understand the group's dynamic. Can I ask a question? He said during a pause. Go ahead, answered Mary Catherine Gardner. Do you all think I have any chance of winning Megan back? The group fell silent for a few seconds. That's not a question for us, said Susan finally. It's a question for yourself. What do you mean? The question isn't whether you have a chance to win her back. The question is, are you willing to accept the person she has become? And who has she become? An independent woman with her own purpose, who doesn't need anyone to be happy, answered Ashley. If you want someone who depends on you to exist, look for someone else. But I love Megan. Do you love the Megan of now or the Megan you left here 2 years ago? Asked Monica. The question made Ethan thoughtful. I don't know. I'm still getting to know the Megan of now. Then maybe it's better if you finish getting to know her first before talking about winning her back, suggested Mrs. Eleanor. At the end of the workshop, Ethan helped organize the materials and clean up the space. Megan watched him work and realized he really did seem different, more mature, more reflective. Ethan, can I ask you something now? She said when they were alone. Sure. Why did you really leave? The truth. Ethan sighed and sat down in one of the chairs. Because I was a coward. When Lily was born and you became more devoted to her, I felt left out. Instead of talking about it, I kept bottling up resentment. And then? Then the pandemic started, we lost income, everything got harder. Instead of facing the problems together with you, I started fantasizing about how much easier it would be if I were alone. And was it? At first, yes. It felt like all the problems had been left behind. But then I realized that problems travel with you in your luggage. There's no point in changing places if you don't change your attitude. And what changed your attitude? Real loneliness. Not the romantic loneliness of someone finding themselves. The raw loneliness of someone who has no one who cares whether you made it home safely. Megan understood perfectly what he meant. She herself had experienced that raw loneliness in the first few months after being abandoned. And now I know that family isn't a prison, it's a shelter, and I threw away the best shelter I ever had. Ethan, you know you can't go back in time, right? I know, and maybe that's for the best. Maybe we need to build something new. Something new like what? I don't know yet, but something where I'm an addition to your life, not a replacement for your independence. The answer impressed Megan. It was exactly the kind of mature reflection she didn't expect from the Ethan who had abandoned her. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. And can I keep coming here, to better understand who you've become?" "You can, but no pressure, no expectations, just to get to know each other." Deal. The following week, Megan traveled to Denver with Mrs. Eleanor for the mental health conference. It was the first time she had left Aspen since Ethan's abandonment. The conference was held at a large hotel in the city center. When they arrived at the auditorium where they would give their presentation, Megan felt completely out of place. "Mrs. Eleanor, everyone here has a degree. We don't know anything about mental health." "Megan, we know about mental health in practice. We live it. That's worth more than any degree." The talk was scheduled for 3 in the afternoon. The auditorium had about 100 people, most of them professionals in the field. "Good afternoon," Megan began, her voice trembling. "My name is Megan Harrison, and this is Eleanor Miller. We are not mental health professionals. We are women who found a way to take care of one another." The presentation lasted 40 minutes. Megan told the whole story, from the abandonment to the crosses, from the crosses to the workshops, from the workshops to the transformation of an entire community. Mrs. Eleanor spoke about the experience of leading groups and about how grief can be transformed into purpose when shared. "What we discovered," Megan concluded, "is that sometimes the best therapy doesn't come from a professional. It comes from someone who went through the same thing you did and managed to come out the other side." When they finished, there was silence in the auditorium. Then a round of enthusiastic applause. During the Q&A period, a psychologist raised her hand. "How do you handle more severe cases? Severe depression, suicide attempts, more serious disorders?" "We don't handle them," Megan answered honestly. "We recognize the limits of what we can do. When someone needs professional help, we refer them. But how do you identify those cases?" "Experience," Mrs. Eleanor answered. "When you go through difficult situations, you develop intuition for recognizing when someone is at a critical point." Another professional asked, "Do you believe this model can be replicated in other communities?" "We do," Megan said, "but not as a one-size-fits-all formula. Every community has to find its own way of mutual care. And what would the role of professionals be in that process?" "Technical support when needed," replied Mrs. Eleanor, "but not total control. The strength of the model lies in its horizontal structure." At the end of the presentation, several people came over to talk. Psychologists, social workers, community project coordinators, all interested in better understanding how to replicate the experience. "Would you be willing to provide consulting for other cities?" asked a public health coordinator. "Consulting," Megan said, surprised. "Yes, helping other communities develop similar projects." The idea of becoming a consultant in anything had never crossed Megan's mind. "I'd have to think about that. I don't know if I have the ability." "Megan," interrupted a psychologist, "you just proved you have more practical community care ability than most trained specialists." During the trip back to Aspen, Megan and Mrs. Eleanor talked about the experience. "How did you feel up there?" asked Mrs. Eleanor. "At first intimidated, but then empowered. You know when you realize you have something valuable to offer?" "I do, and you really do, we do." "Do you think we should accept those invitations to help other cities?" "Why not? If we manage to transform our community, maybe we can help others too." When they got home, Lily was at Mrs. Eleanor's house with Ethan. He had offered to take care of her during the trip. "How was it, Mom?" asked Lily, excited. "It was incredible, sweetheart. People were very interested in our work." "And what do they want?" "They want us to help other cities run workshops like ours." "Does that mean we're going to travel?" "Maybe, if we decide to accept." Ethan, who had been watching the conversation in silence, finally spoke up. "Megan, can I say something?" "Go ahead." "I'm really proud of you, of what you built here, of what you presented up there. You've become an incredible person." "Thank you. And I want you to know that no matter what happens between us, I'll fully support these new projects of yours." "What do you mean?" "If you want to take on these consulting jobs, I can help with Lily, with the house, with whatever you need. Without expecting anything in return. without expecting anything in return, just as support from someone who cares about the two of you. Ethan's sincere offer marked a turning point in how Megan saw him. For the first time, she was able to see in him not the man who had abandoned her, but a genuinely remorseful person trying to do everything within his reach to make amends. In the following weeks, 3 concrete invitations came in for Megan and Mrs. Eleanor. A city in the countryside of Washington State, one in Oregon and one in Virginia, wanted to implement similar projects. "What do you two think?" asked Valerie during a meeting to discuss the proposals. "I'm excited," said Mrs. Eleanor. "I think I've found my life's purpose. And you, Megan?" "I'm torn. It's exciting but also scary. And there's the practical issue. How am I going to keep the workshops going here if I'm traveling?" "For that, we train other people to coordinate in our absence," suggested Mrs. Eleanor. "Mary Catherine and Susan have already shown interest." "That's true," agreed Valerie. "You've already built a network strong enough to sustain itself." The decision was to take on all 3 projects, but in phases. The first would be in Washington State in August, the second in Oregon in October, the third in Virginia, only the following year. During the preparations for the first consulting trip, Ethan proved to be an unexpectedly efficient source of support. He helped organize materials, handled logistical details, and took on responsibilities with Lily without Megan having to ask. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one night when he was helping pack up tools. "Because I want you to succeed. Simple as that. Even knowing that my success might mean I don't need you anymore. Megan, I've already understood that you'll never need me the way you used to. The question isn't whether you need me, it's whether you want my company. And you'd be satisfied with just company, with no guarantees?" "I would. Having your company is already more than I deserve after what I did." The first consulting trip was to Portland, in Washington State. Megan and Mrs. Eleanor spent a week there, getting to know the community, understanding the region's specific problems, and adapting the workshop methodology to the local reality. "The important thing," Megan explained to the group of local coordinators, "isn't to copy exactly what we do. It's to understand the principle, creating safe spaces where people who have gone through similar experiences can support one another." "And always with a hands-on activity?" asked a social worker. "Not necessarily. In our region, woodworking made sense, because that's what I had started with. Here it could be something else. The important thing is that it's an activity that keeps hands busy while people process their emotions." The project in Portland was adapted into therapeutic sewing. The participants made patchwork quilts that were later donated to local shelters. "You see how the adaptation worked perfectly?" said Mrs. Eleanor on the last day. "The principle is the same, but the application adapted to the local reality." During the trip back, the two talked about how each experience was teaching them something new about the work they did. "You know what impresses me the most," said Mrs. Eleanor. "What?" "How everywhere we go, we find women going through the same things we went through, as if it were universal. It's almost as if society systematically creates these wounds in women," reflected Megan, "and then expects them to heal on their own, in silence, without bothering anyone." "Exactly. That's why our work is important. We're creating spaces to heal collectively." When they returned to Aspen, they found the local workshops running perfectly under the coordination of Mary Catherine Gardner and Susan. The group had grown to 15 regular participants. "How are things here?" asked Megan. "Quiet," answered Mary Catherine. "We even had 2 situations where we needed to refer people for psychological support, but we followed exactly the protocol you taught us." "What kind of situations?" "An elderly woman with very severe depression and a young woman with a history of self-harm attempts. We talked with them, explained our limits, and helped them find professional help. And they took it well? They did. In fact, they were even grateful for the honesty. They said that in other places, people tried to minimize their problems. The ability of the substitute coordinators to handle complex situations showed that the project had matured beyond expectations. For the second project in Chicago, Megan and Mrs. Eleanor worked with Salvadoran immigrant women. The cultural adaptation was a bigger challenge. How are we going to create workshops for people who have lost not just families, but entire countries? Asked Megan before the first session. The same way, answered Mrs. Eleanor, by offering a space to turn pain into something constructive. The project with the Salvadoran women became jewelry-making workshops using traditional techniques from their home country. The pieces produced were sold at a community store, generating income for the participants. "Do you know what's happening here?" said one of the Venezuelan women, Carmen, during the third session. "You're giving us back our identity." "What do you mean?" asked Megan. "When we got here, we were just refugees. We had no names, no stories. We were just problems to be solved. Here we became people with skills, with culture, with something to offer. And that has to do with the jewelry?" "It does. When I make a piece using techniques I learned from my grandmother in Venezuela, I connect with who I was before I became a refugee." The experience with the Venezuelan women taught Megan and Mrs. Eleanor that their method worked not only for women in grief or abandonment, but for anyone who needed to rebuild identity and belonging. Back in Aspen, they found a surprise. Ethan had organized a small party to celebrate the success of their consulting projects. "What's this?" asked Megan, seeing the decorated backyard. "A celebration," replied Lily, excited. "Daddy said you two deserve to be recognized for the important work you're doing. Ethan, you didn't have to—" "Yes, I did. Megan, you and Mrs. Eleanor are changing lives in several cities. That deserves to be celebrated." The party was small, only with the regular workshop participants and a few neighbors who had become supporters of the project, but it was warm and meaningful. "I want to make a toast," said Mary Catherine, raising a glass of soda, "to two women who turned their own pain into medicine for others' pain, and to a community that learned that caring for one another is more important than judging one another," added Susan. During the party, Megan watched the scene, her backyard full of people talking, laughing, supporting one another. The crucifixes that were once symbols of her personal pain were now part of a scene of connection and collective healing. "What are you thinking about?" asked Ethan, approaching. "I'm thinking about how everything has changed. 3 years ago, this backyard was a place where I'd sit alone processing abandonment. Today it's a place of gathering and mutual support. You turned your wound into a source of healing. It wasn't just me. It was this whole network of women that formed. But it started with you, with your courage to not hide the pain. Ethan, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "What have you learned in all these months watching our work?" Ethan was thoughtful for a few seconds. "I learned that running away from problems doesn't solve anything. I learned that shared pain is diminished pain. And I learned that you've become a much more interesting person than I ever thought possible." "More interesting how?" "You were always a good person, but now you're a person with purpose, someone who found her mission in life." "And does that change anything between us?" "It changes everything, because now I know that if you give me another chance, it won't be out of dependence or neediness. It will be a conscious choice." The conversation was interrupted by Lily, who came to show a small cross she had made to give to a classmate from school. "Mum, can I give this to Chloe? She's sad because her parents are going to separate." "Of course, sweetheart, but explain to her that it's not about religion, it's just a symbol that people can get through difficult things." "I already did." She understood. She said she wants to come to a workshop when she's older. Watching Lily naturally embracing the values of mutual support and community care filled Megan with satisfaction. Her daughter was growing up in an environment where helping others was seen as normal and important. At the end of the party, when everyone had gone home, Megan, Ethan, and Lily stayed to clean up the backyard. "Dad, are you sleeping here tonight?" asked Lily. Ethan looked at Megan, waiting for her answer. "You can stay," she said, "but on the living room couch." "Thank you." It was the first time in 3 years that Ethan had spent the night at the house, but now it was different. He wasn't there as a husband returning to reclaim his place. He was there as someone who was slowly earning the right to take part in the new life Megan had built. The next morning, Megan woke up and found Ethan in the kitchen making coffee. "Good morning," he said. "I hope you don't mind. I thought it would be a way to thank you for the hospitality." "I don't mind." The two of them had coffee together while Lily was still asleep. It was a domestic scene that might have seemed familiar, but it had a completely different quality from the days of their marriage. "Megan, can I talk about us?" Ethan asked after a few minutes of silence. "Go ahead. I know I still have a lot to prove. I know I lost the right to expect anything, but I want you to know that I'm willing to build a new relationship with you, not a patched-up version of the old one. What would that new relationship look like? One where I respect your independence, where I support your projects, where I'm an addition to your life, not a replacement for your autonomy. And are you sure you can do that? Honestly? I don't know, but I'm willing to try. And if I can't, I accept that we lost the chance forever." Why? Why is it so important to you? Because during these months watching you work, I realized I fell in love with the person you've become, not with the memory of who you were. Ethan's sincerity touched Megan in a way she didn't expect. "And what if I decide I'd rather be alone? I'll accept it and keep being the best father I can be to Lily. Even if I get involved with someone else in the future." Ethan hesitated for a moment. "That would be hard, but yes, I would accept it." The conversation was interrupted by Lily waking up and coming down to the kitchen. "Something smells good. Did Dad make breakfast?" "He did," Megan replied. "Can I have coffee with the two of you?" Of course. The three of them had coffee together, and for the first time Megan could imagine a version of family that was different from the original. But that worked. 2 weeks later, the invitation that would change everything arrived. A university wanted to hire Megan and Mrs. Eleanor to develop an extension program based on their methodologies. "Is this for real?" Megan asked when Valerie brought the proposal. "Very real. They want you two as coordinators of a project that will train multipliers all over the state. But we don't have academic backgrounds. Megan, you have something better, proven practical experience. The university wants to give you the chance to systematize this knowledge. And how would it work? You would teach courses for professionals from various fields, psychologists, social workers, nurses, educators. You would teach them how to implement community mutual support methodologies." Mrs. Eleanor was excited right away. "Megan, this is an opportunity to impact hundreds of communities, but it's a huge responsibility. What if we can't do it?" "What if we can?" Valerie countered. "You've already proven you can. In Aspen, in Portland, in Chicago. How long would it be?" 2 years initially, with the possibility of renewal if the project works out. "And would I have to move?" "Not necessarily. Part of the work would be here, creating a reference center. Part would be traveling to implement projects. The proposal was tempting, but it required a decision that would completely change Megan's life." "Can I talk to Lily and think about it?" "Of course, but they need an answer by the end of the month." That night, Megan talked to her daughter about the university's proposal. "Does that mean you're going to become a teacher, Mom?" "Something like that. But it would be different. I'd teach adults about how to help other people." "And would we move?" "Not necessarily, but I would travel more." Lily grew thoughtful. "Mom, can I say something serious?" "Of course. I think you should accept." "Why?" "Because you're happy when you're helping other people. And if you can help more people, you should do it." "And you'd be okay seeing me less?" "I would. Mostly because I know you'd be doing something important." "And Daddy? What do you think about him being here?" "I like it, but I don't need him to be happy. I learned that from you." Lily's maturity continued to impress Megan. At 8 years old, the girl had already internalized lessons about independence and purpose that many adults never learn. The next morning, Megan talked to Ethan about the offer. "It's an incredible opportunity," he said without hesitation. "And what about our situation?" "Our situation stays however you want it to stay. If you accept the offer, I'll fully support you. If that means less time to develop a relationship between us, I accept that." "Do you really mean that?" "Megan, I've already understood that your professional and personal success doesn't diminish me. Quite the opposite. It makes me proud. I want to be part of the life of a woman who's changing the world, not someone who needs me to exist." Ethan's response removed the last barrier Megan had to accepting the offer. Then it's decided. I'm going to accept. The decision to accept the university's offer marked the beginning of a new phase in Megan's life. Over the following months, she and Mrs. Eleanor dedicated themselves to structuring the outreach program, creating teaching materials, and preparing the first groups of multipliers. The resource center was set up in a house provided by the Aspen City Hall. It was a larger space than Megan's backyard, but it kept the welcoming, informal atmosphere that characterized the original workshops. It's strange working in an official place after working from my home for so long, Megan commented on the first day in the new space. But it's the natural evolution, Mrs. Eleanor replied. We started by healing our own wounds. Then we moved on to helping other people heal theirs. Now we're going to teach other people to do the same. The first group of multipliers had 20 students, psychologists, social workers, nurses, educators, and some community volunteers. The diverse mix created interesting dynamics during the classes. What do you find hardest to understand about our methodology? Megan asked during the third class. The lack of hierarchy, one psychologist answered. We're used to the therapist-patient relationship. Here everyone is on the same level. And why does that bother you? Because we lose control. There's no way to guarantee things will happen the right way. And what would the right way be? Mrs. Eleanor asked. Well, following scientific protocols, proven methods. And do you think our methods aren't proven? Megan asked. They're proven empirically, but not scientifically. I see. And what's the difference? The psychologist hesitated. You don't control variables. You don't systematically document results. You don't follow standardized methodologies. That's true, Megan agreed. Because we're not doing scientific research, we're offering human care. But how do we know if it's working? By observing people, Mrs. Eleanor answered simply. If they're less sad, more hopeful, more connected to one another, it's working. But that's subjective. And what's wrong with subjectivity? Megan questioned. Pain is subjective, healing is subjective. Why should care have to be objective? The debate between the scientific approach and the humanistic approach repeated itself several times throughout the course. Megan and Mrs. Eleanor learned to navigate these tensions without losing the essence of their work. One of the students who stood out most was Andrew, a 45-year-old nurse who worked at a community health center in a neighboring town. Can I tell you why I'm here? He said during one of the practical classes. Of course, Megan encouraged him. I've worked in public health for 20 years. Every day I see people who come to the clinic not just with physical pain, but with emotional pain that we don't know how to treat. And what do you do in those cases? We refer them to a psychologist when we can get an opening, which is rare. Most of the time we just listen and try to offer support. But we always have the feeling that it's not enough. And how can our methodology help? I could create mutual support groups right inside the community health center. People with diabetes talking to each other about how to cope with the disease. Mothers of premature babies supporting one another. Elderly people with depression meeting regularly. Andrew's perspective opened a new frontier for Megan and Mrs. Eleanor's work. Integration with the public health system. Andrew, would you be willing to implement a pilot project at your community health center? Asked Mrs. Eleanor. I'd love to, but I'd need support to convince the administration. What kind of support? Data, evidence, something that proves the investment is worth it. And how can we get that? By documenting our results better, suggested Megan. It doesn't have to be formal research, but at least systematized records. The need to systematize results led Megan and Mrs. Eleanor to partner with a master's student in community psychology at the university. Rachel was 26 and wanted to research non-conventional mental health methodologies. Can I observe some of the workshops to document the process? Asked Rachel. You can, but without interfering with the group dynamic, Megan replied. And do the participants agree to be observed? We'll ask them. To Megan's surprise, all the participants were excited about the possibility of contributing to a study. It's important that other people know this works, said Mary Catherine Gardner, so that more people can be helped. Rachel attended the workshops for 3 months, conducting individual interviews with the participants and documenting the transformations she observed. "What impresses me most," she said in a conversation with Megan, "is how the group self-regulates. You barely need to intervene. That's because we create a safe space and let people take care of each other." But how do you know when to intervene and when to let the group flow? Intuition developed through experience, and through first-hand experience of what works and what doesn't. Is that something that can be taught? It can, but not through theory, only through supervised practice. Rachel's research resulted in a thesis that provided the first academic documentation of Megan and Mrs. Eleanor's methodology. The work was well received at the university and opened doors for larger funding. 6 months after the start of the outreach program, unexpected news arrived. The Department of Health had selected the project as one of the innovative initiatives to be replicated nationally. "Is this serious?" Megan asked when she received the call. "Very serious," the national coordinator replied. "We want you in Washington, D.C. to present the project to a technical committee." Washington, D.C.? Yes, and if they approve it, the project will receive funding for national expansion. The prospect of taking her work to a national level was both exciting and frightening for Megan. "Do you think we're ready for this?" she asked Mrs. Eleanor. "Megan, 3 years ago, you were alone in your backyard making crosses to keep from going crazy. Today you're a consultant to a state university, and you could become a national reference. Of course we're ready. But that's a lot of responsibility. And a lot of opportunity, too. Think about how many women across the country are going through what you went through and have no support at all." The trip to Washington, D.C. was scheduled for the following month. Megan prepared intensively, studying mental health data from across the country, reviewing the methodology, and practicing the presentation. 2 days before the trip, something no one expected happened. Ethan proposed to Megan. It happened during a simple dinner at home, with just the 3 of them. Ethan had prepared Megan and Lily's favorite meal, and the mood was relaxed. "Can I share something important with you two?" he said after dessert. "Of course," Megan replied. "Over these past months, watching you two being part of your lives, supporting Megan's projects, I came to understand something important." "What?" "I came to understand that you two are my family, not in the old sense, where family was obligation and convention, in the new sense, where family is choice and mutual support." Megan and Lily listened in silence. "That's why I want to make it official. I want to ask you both to marry me." Lily got excited. "Daddy is asking to get married again." "He is," Ethan smiled, "but different from the first time. This time he knows he's asking to be part of the lives of 2 incredible women, not to take charge of those lives." Megan was visibly moved. "Ethan, Megan, I know you don't need me, and that's exactly why I want to be with you. I want to choose to stand beside someone who is complete on her own, but who can be even better with company. And if I say yes, what would it be like? Whatever you want it to be. The 3 of us building a new family with new rules based on mutual respect and mutual support." Megan looked at Lily, who was clearly hoping for a positive answer. "What do you think, Lily?" "I think Daddy learned to be a better person, and I think we can try to be a better family, too." "And you, what do you think?" Ethan asked. "I think, yes. I think we can try to build something new together." The proposal was accepted, but with clear conditions. The marriage would be a partnership of equals, with mutual support for individual projects and joint decision-making on everything that affected the family. "And if it doesn't work out?" Megan asked. "Then we separate again, but this time as mature people who tried and couldn't make it work, not as people who ran away without trying." The decision to remarry brought Megan a sense of closure, not because she had gone back to the beginning, but because she had built something entirely new on the foundation of what she had learned. The trip to Washington, D.C. took place with Ethan and Lily, accompanying Megan and Mrs. Eleanor. It was the blended family's first trip. The presentation at the Department of Health was given to a panel of 15 experts. Megan was nervous, but confident in the solidity of the work she had developed. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "I'm here to represent a model of mental health care that was born out of necessity and grew through its effectiveness. a model that proves that communities themselves have the resources to take care of their emotional health, as long as they have adequate support. The presentation lasted an hour and included recorded testimonials from workshop participants, data compiled from Rachel's research, and concrete proposals for nationwide implementation. "How do you intend to maintain the quality of care in a nationwide expansion?" one of the experts asked. "Through ongoing training of facilitators and regular supervision of local projects," Mrs. Eleanor answered. "And how do you guarantee it won't become guesswork without a technical basis?" "By establishing partnerships with local universities to document and continuously evaluate the results," Megan explained. "What would the cost per beneficiary be?" "It's roughly 10 times cheaper than traditional individual therapy, because it uses community resources and multiplies the impact through groups." The questions went on for another hour. Megan and Mrs. Eleanor answered all of them with confidence, showing how much they had matured since the first workshops in the backyard. The committee's decision came a week later. The project was approved for national implementation, with 3 years of funding and a goal of reaching 100 municipalities. "We did it," said Mrs. Eleanor when they got the news. "We did what?" asked Megan. "Turning our personal pain into national public policy." The phrase perfectly summed up the journey they had traveled, from the first crucifixes in the backyard to the ministerial approval. National implementation began 6 months later, with Megan coordinating the South and Southeast regions, Mrs. Eleanor in charge of the Northeast and North, and the Midwest under the responsibility of Andrew, the nurse who had stood out in the Train the Trainer course. "It's strange to think that our method will be in 100 cities, commented Megan during a planning meeting. "And it's gratifying to know that women going through what we went through will have the support we didn't have," added Mrs. Eleanor. The first year of national implementation was intense. Megan traveled to dozens of cities, training local coordinators, adapting methodologies, and monitoring the early results. Everywhere she went, she found stories similar to hers. Women who had faced loss, abandonment, and grief, and who found in the workshops a way to turn suffering into purpose. "Did you create all this?" asked a participant in Springfield. "I didn't create it alone. I created it with many women who went through the same things I did." "And how did you manage to overcome depression?" "Not alone. It was by building connections with other people who understood my pain and wanted to overcome it alongside me." Megan's answers were refined by experience, but the essence remained the same. Healing happens in community, not in isolation. At the end of the first year, the national results exceeded all expectations. The 100 participating municipalities reported significant reductions in cases of depression and anxiety, increased community cohesion, and the development of sustainable mutual support networks. "You changed the paradigm of community mental health in the United States," said the national coordinator during an evaluation meeting. "We didn't change anything," replied Megan. "We just systematized what people have always known, that taking care of each other is good for everyone." The success of the national project brought international recognition. Megan and Mrs. Eleanor were invited to present the methodology at conferences in Canada, Mexico, and Panama. "I never imagined I'd one day be talking about our work to people from other countries," said Mrs. Eleanor on the plane to Ottawa. "Neither did I. But it makes sense. Pain and healing are universal, no matter the language." At the international conference, they met coordinators of similar projects from various countries in the Americas. They discovered that similar experiences were spontaneously emerging in different places. "It feels like we're living through a historic movement," commented a Canadian psychologist. "What kind of movement?" asked Megan. "Back to community care. For decades we individualized emotional problems. Now we're rediscovering that mental health is a collective issue." The historical perspective made Megan reflect on the scope of what they had built. It wasn't just a successful project, but a paradigm shift in how society understands and cares for emotional health. 3 years after national implementation began, the project had become permanent public policy, incorporated into the public health system. Megan and Mrs. Eleanor had trained over 1,000 multipliers across the country. "I think we've accomplished our mission," said Mrs. Eleanor one afternoon, as they watched a workshop taking place at the reference center in Aspen. Which mission? To prove that it's possible to turn personal suffering into collective benefit. And now? Now, the methodology has a life of its own. It will grow and transform without needing us. The prospect of retiring from the project that had become the center of their lives stirred mixed feelings in Megan. On one hand, pride in its success. On the other, uncertainty about what the next step would be. The answer came unexpectedly, through an invitation from the Regional Health Organization to coordinate a similar program for all of Latin America. Would you two be willing to move to Washington, D.C.? The regional coordinator asked during a video conference. Washington, D.C., Megan said, startled. It would be the program's regional headquarters. You would coordinate implementation in 20 countries. The offer was tempting, but it would mean leaving Aspen, leaving the community that had become her foundation. May I discuss it with my family and give you an answer? Of course, but know that you're our first choice. No one else has the practical experience and credibility that you've developed. That night, Megan talked with Ethan and Lily about the proposal. Would you come with me? She asked. To Washington, D.C., asked Lily, now 11 years old. Does that mean I'd learn English? It does, and you'd experience a different culture. And would Dad be able to find work there? He would, Ethan replied, and he'd fully support your mom's decision. Even if it means starting over from scratch in another country. Megan, 8 years ago you started over from scratch in an empty house. Now you have family, you have purpose, you have experience. Starting over in another country with all of that is much easier. And won't you miss it here? We will, Lily said, but we carry Aspen in our hearts. Besides, when you're doing something important, where you do it matters less than the thing itself. Once again, Lily's wisdom impressed Megan. At 11 years old, her daughter had already internalized lessons about purpose and courage that many adults never learn. The final decision was to accept the international offer. But before moving, Megan wanted to hold one last big workshop in Aspen, bringing together all the people who had been part of the journey. The event took place on a Saturday morning at the municipal school gymnasium. More than 200 people attended, participants from the original workshops, multipliers trained in the extension program, coordinators from other towns, and neighbors who had become supporters. When I started making crosses in my backyard, Megan said at the opening, I was just trying to save myself. I never imagined it would grow into a movement that would help thousands of people. But the seed of everything that happened afterward was already there, said Mrs. Eleanor. It was in Megan's refusal to suffer alone and in silence. And in the courage to turn private pain into collective action, added Valerie, who had become the state program coordinator. During the event, several people shared how the workshops had transformed their lives. Mary Catherine Gardner had become a multiplier and coordinated groups in 3 neighboring towns. Susan had gone back to school and earned a degree in social psychology. Ashley had started a cooperative for single mothers. Each of you took what you learned here and turned it into something unique, Megan observed. That's exactly how it should be. The most moving moment of the event was when Tyler, the teenager who had vandalized the crosses years earlier, stood up to speak. Can I say something? He asked, now 18 years old and visibly embarrassed. Of course, Megan encouraged him. I wanted to apologize. Not just for destroying the crosses, but for not understanding at the time what you all were doing. How do you understand now? My girlfriend took part in the workshops last year. She was depressed after her parents split up. The workshops helped her a lot. That's when I understood that you were saving people, not being crazy. And what do you do today, Tyler? I'm studying psychology. I want to work in community mental health. Tyler's transformation from vandal to future professional in the field perfectly illustrated how the work had impacted the entire community, not just the direct participants. At the end of the event, Megan visited her backyard one last time before the move. The crucifixes were still there, now more weathered by time, but still full of meaning. I'm going to miss them, she told Ethan. You can make new ones in Washington, D.C. It won't be the same. No, it will be something new, something suited to what you've become and what you're going to do there. Megan walked among the crucifixes, touching each one and remembering the moment she created them. They represented not just her personal journey, but the birth of a movement that was now spreading across continents. "Thank you," she said in a low voice to the crucifixes, as if they could hear her. On the morning of the departure, dozens of people gathered at the bus station to say goodbye. Mrs. Eleanor, who had decided to remain in Brazil coordinating the national implementation, was visibly emotional. "Take good care of yourselves," she said, hugging Megan, Ethan and Lily. "You too. And don't let the project lose its essence. Never. The essence is mutual care. That doesn't change, no matter how many people are involved." During the bus ride to the airport in Denver, Megan kept looking out the window at the landscapes of Colorado. It was the first time she was leaving the state where she had been born and raised. "Nervous?" Ethan asked. "A little, but also excited." "About what?" "About the possibility of helping women in other countries discover what I discovered, that we are stronger than we imagine, and that taking care of each other multiplies that strength." On the plane, Lily asked, "Mom, do you think Washington, D.C. has sad women like there were here?" "I'm sure it does, sweetheart. Sadness is universal, but so is the strength to overcome sadness. And are you going to help them?" "I'm going to try, along with other people who think alike." "Like you helped here, by showing that it's possible to transform any difficult situation into an opportunity for growth and connection with other people?" When the plane took off, Megan felt a mix of nostalgia and anticipation. She was leaving behind the life she had rebuilt, but she carried with her everything she had learned about resilience, community, and personal transformation. The future was uncertain, but she was no longer afraid of uncertainty. She had learned that the best things in life are often born from the hardest moments, when we are forced to discover inner resources we didn't even know we had. 3 months later, Megan was coordinating the implementation of mutual support workshops in 20 Latin American countries. The work that had begun with a single woman making crucifixes in a backyard in Aspen now impacted hundreds of thousands of people on 2 continents. But for Megan, the success wasn't in the numbers or international recognition. It was in the letters she received weekly from women telling how they had found the strength to overcome their own crises through community mutual support. One letter in particular had touched her deeply. It was from a young Venezuelan refugee living in Costa Rica. "Dear Mrs. Megan, my name is Carmen, and for 6 months I've been taking part in the workshops that your approach inspired here in San Jose. When I first arrived in Costa Rica, I had lost everything: my country, my family, my identity. I was completely lost and desperate. In the workshops, I found women who understood my pain and helped me discover that I still had so much to offer the world. Today, I coordinate a support group for other refugees, and I'm studying to have my teaching degree validated. I wanted you to know that your courage in not hiding your own pain has saved far more lives than you could ever imagine. Thank you for teaching us that healing happens when we stop pretending everything is fine and start taking care of one another with honesty." Reading the letter, Megan remembered the desperate woman she had been 8 years earlier, hammering nails into an old board while tears streamed down her face. She never could have imagined that her pain would become a source of healing for so many people. End of story. And now, tell us, what did you think of Megan's journey? Were you able to relate to any moment in the story? Do you believe she made the right choices in turning her pain into purpose and help for others? Share your opinion in the comments. We love knowing how our stories touch your hearts. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other emotional stories that might inspire your own journey.